Hi, everyone. Welcome. Great to see everyone logging in, joining this morning or afternoon or evening, wherever we all are. It's always hard to do like an announcement for timing when I'm like, where is everyone? Here it's morning, but different. Great to see everyone joining this morning. Welcome to How We Recover, a virtual event that we partnership with the Eating Disorder Foundation based out of Denver with the folks with over at Eat, Breathe, Thrive. Chelsea, where are you all based out of? Just
We're technically based out of Boulder, but I'm based in England. So we're all over. We're
all over.
international. Yeah.
Beautiful. That's what I was like. I know we're based out of here too. EDF is based out of Denver, but we're everywhere as well. So always good to just know where we have touch points at. But great to see everyone. How We Recover is an event where we bring recovery voices from different folks and different perspectives, just to create an open dialogue around different experiences in recovery. We often hear so many voices around, we know how like the hardships, the losses that we have in this community, and when Chelsea and I were discussing bringing How We Recover to fruition, we were like, we want to amplify voices of recovery and what it's like to live a life in recovery so that more folks can hear and hopefully provide perspective, inspiration, motivation for continuing this journey that we know can be really isolating and locked in with shame. So that's our hope here is to create inspirational, hopeful conversations of just reality of what it's like to live a life in recovery from an eating disorder. So I will give a little introduction about myself and then pass it off to our other panelists to introduce ourselves. My name's Lydia. I use any pronouns. I'm a staff member at EDF. I've also been in recovery from an eating disorder for about a decade. And I also grew up in my family system with my mother who struggled with an eating disorder throughout my life. So I have a little bit of family perspective, personal perspective, and just care deeply about this community. So I'll hand it over to our other EDF representative here, Otter, and then we'll bounce over to Chelsea and Amanda to introduce themselves.
Yes, my name is Otter. I'm also here in Denver. I've been in recovery, active recovery for about 15 years. And I work with the EDF, but I'm not a staff member or anything. I run a support group. Um, but probably for about 14 of those 15 years. Um, so yeah,
Go ahead, Amanda. You go first.
Okay, my name is Amanda. I have been in recovery for about 7 years now. I volunteer with eBreathe Thrive. I've been with them for forever now, forever. Um, so happy to be here.
Great. And I'm Chelsea. Depending on how you count, I've probably been in recovery close to 2 decades, not quite. And I am based in England in a county called Sussex. And I'm very happy to be here with you all. Just wondered also for everyone that's joining us live, you might want to share in the chat where you're joining us from, because we tend to get a really global group. So it's always really fun to see and hear. And we'll go ahead and get started, but I just want to emphasize that this is, oh, yay, other UK people are here as well. That this is a very interactive event. So we come with a theme and a question, and Lydia and I will kind of ask that question to the group, and we'll each of us will kind of weigh in. So you get to hear a perspective from someone different in recovery on that point. But what we love about these is that they become really interactive. So do use the chat. Please feel free to ask follow-up questions, and we keep our eyes on the chat and we'll grab the questions from the chat and try to get as many answered as we can. So on that note, I don't even think we have to get too creative with questions because the whole theme is a question, and we could probably spend the entire time on this question. And that question is, what does intuitive eating even mean? And maybe I'll just contextualize that question with, I know that when I was in recovery, kind of early years of recovery, there came a point when my dietitian said, Chelsea, I think you've been on a meal plan for a while now, and it's time to do this next step, this, big next step to intuitive eating. And I was like, what? What does that even mean? Like, you want me to eat intuitively? Isn't that how I got here? Was eating intuitively? Sure, let's see how this goes. You know. So Yeah, what does that mean to you? You know, Lydia, Amanda, Otter, what was your experience with that even? You know, what's your reaction, maybe even to the term intuitive eating?
I can go because I think mine might be similar to Chelsea's in the sense that I was asked to do the exact same thing, and I'm like, that's not a thing. That's like you said, that's what got me in trouble listening to my own body, and I because I didn't know what that meant, and I actually had to spend quite a bit of time, um, even wondering what hunger was and trying to figure out the cues that my body was actually telling me, but I had never heard. Um, and so that was my introduction to intuitive eating was just the basic, what does hunger sound like? And one of the things that kind of shocked me is it's not just a feeling. There are actually thoughts that pop into your head before you even recognize um, the hunger of your stomach grumbling. That's kind of far down the line, actually, that I learned, uh, and just the thought of, am I gonna, where am I eating lunch? As I realize this, that pops in my head when I start to get hungry. I didn't realize that the thought itself was a hunger cue, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought when they said intuitive eating, I thought like grumbling stomach, things like that. Not just the whole bag. So that was my introduction.
I can go. I feel like intuitive eating was presented to me as kind of the gold standard of recovery. And it was like, we're all born intuitive eaters. And like we come out of the womb knowing what to do. We cry when we're hungry. And so it felt like this thing over here that I'm supposed to always aim for. And it's supposed to just be inside me. And if I just listen hard enough to my body, I'll know what to do. But I think one, for anyone, eating disorder or not, that's really, really tough in our society. There's food insecurity. We have lives. Maybe we have to go to class, so we need to eat lunch now before we're hungry. Like there's all these reasons why we can't always just be like, what am I feeling? Um, but then for people with eating disorders, it's very, very tricky because we have tamped down those cues. And now all of a sudden we're supposed to go from a meal plan to listen to your body. And that's very, very hard. And so I think intuitive eating for me, and I'm just learning this kind of now, is um, a lot of tolerating discomfort because I need to eat even if I don't feel very well. I might need to, like, maybe I'm not having a hunger cue, and well, you just got to do it. So it's not do whatever you feel. That sounds really nice. But when we're trying to trust our bodies again, that's not, or just living in our society, I don't feel like that's very um, doable. So intuitive eating, I think, needs a little bit of a rebrand because it seems like this kind of amorphous, castle in the sky that we're supposed to aim for. But I think I love this conversation because we're going to redefine it a little bit and make it maybe a bit more approachable for people listening.
Yeah. I really am so like interested in this conversation because I like feel like I just since I've been in the field too now working wise, it's so interesting to be like, oh yeah, intuitive and just like coming back to that point of like everyone knows how to do this. And then I'm like, oh yeah, but how many of us are like trained out of being intuitive with like so many of our senses and so many things, especially those of us that struggle with anxiety, personally speaking, that have like an anxiety disorder or like depression and that like trusting our bodies and like thoughts isn't always a helpful thing and that sometimes it can lead us into these eating disorder patterns like my own journey. So I think it's really helpful to talk about, and I didn't hear about intuitive eating until starting recovery. It's not something that I had ever heard of like before, and I don't know how many people outside of our field or outside of struggling with this illness know about intuitive eating versus like diet culture things. I think more people are just like on the diet culture wagon, to be honest. So I feel like to me, intuitive eating became a thing like in recovery and like the like you guys all said too, like the gold standard what everyone's working towards. And for me, it's been a lot more of like reconnecting to things that I historically had liked and that felt intuitive of like it's so kind of I guess coming back to that like we all knew how to eat like intuitively like when we were like younger. And so I went back a lot of like what I did when I first got off my like meal plan of structure with my dietitian was like what kind of things brought joy or like were interesting for you when you were younger or things that like historically have had like just kind of like ceremonial things or things that are just common in everyday life that I wanted to reintroduce in a like more like natural way for me. So I do think I had some level of that element of like what things sparked joy earlier or just like comfort or any of those things to help ease me into the intuitiveness of like, okay, can I reconnect with a part of or a past version of myself that maybe didn't have the disordered thoughts around that certain type of food or food group. Um, so I do think there was a level of that for me. And also in my mind too, now being where I'm at, it does feel like a level of like reconnection that I've been able to develop with my body over the years of being able to say like, I do feel like I recognize like when I have the thought of like when am I gonna have lunch, right? And then being like, oh, that's telling me that I should start preparing for this and start planning and consider what sounds good. And I do feel like I've been able to get to a place that I can really lean into like what does sound good and know that it's like meeting all of my needs still. So I feel really like fortunate in my relationship that I've built with my body over the last couple of years and strengthened that like reconnection to intuitive. And how that looks for me. And I think that might be different because I'm even hearing what Amanda said of like, oh yeah, maybe intuitive is not the right word for everyone. I'm seeing in the chat someone brought up conscious eating. And I love that. I love the discussion of language and what works for people. So I think that's why these conversations are always really helpful for me to know that there's different ways that we all like resonate with words and language and how it like shows up in our lives, especially with eating and whatever words we place in front of that.
I love all of this. And I picked up on that conscious eating that was brought up in the chat as well. I really like that phrase. I think language is always kind of trapping, isn't it? You know, as soon as we put a name to it, mindful eating, intuitive eating, you know, it becomes something. I have a response to this, but I also just wondered, you know, for those who are with us, I'm just curious and we do record these events and put them on YouTube afterwards, which is why we keep it to just the speakers on the panel speaking. But I wondered if anyone wanted to kind of give us a sense in the chat of maybe what your experience has been with intuitive eating and meal plans, just because it kind of helps us cater the conversation a bit better. You know, have you tried it? Are you still on meal plans? You know, have you always done intuitive eating? But um, my own experience, I guess what comes up for me with intuitive eating is one that it took me, I was really not into it to begin with. I thought it was just, to be honest, I just thought it was a really dumb idea. I was like, I was like, this is, you know, let's see what happens when I eat intuitively. I had a restrictive eating disorder. I was like, I won't eat. This is just giving my eating disorder free rein. Um, and then I think similar to what some of the other panelists have spoken to, I did not have hunger signals. I was not getting hunger signals. So it just felt like a huge missing step to assume I could just move off from a meal plan. I'd also spent years in treatment having to ignore my fullness signals in order to get my body renourished. And so I don't really feel I was getting fullness signals either. So it just felt like there was a piece missing between meal plan and intuitive eating that was like feeling your way through the dark. I was like, my body is not speaking to me in that way. So I think what I found really transformative, for a lack of a better word, was um, really working to build interoceptive pathways. So interoception is kind of like a word like proprioception. It means your ability to sense what's happening inside of your body. And you have lots of interoceptive pathways. You've got hunger, fullness, fatigue, tiredness, thirst. All of those are signals our body sends. And I had to spend really years learning to rebuild the pathways, particularly hunger and fullness, that were under firing. And then I also had interoceptive pathways that were like really way too active, like hypersensitive, like, you know, pain and anxiety. So that was really valuable. And I will say, I did find it valuable years later to be able to eat when I was hungry and stop when I was full because for so long, I'd either had diet culture really regulating what I was eating or a meal plan, which made it really difficult to just go about the world socially. Like people would say, "Do you want to come have dinner?" And I would be like, "Well, that's not on my meal plan, so I can't." So, um, but I felt like interoception was the missing piece for me. Um, I guess that is a question for Otter, Lydia, and Amanda. Did you make that? Do you feel like you eat intuitively now? Like, is that something that has shown up for you in recovery, or does that look different? Are meal plans still a part of it? And if it's not eating intuitively, how would you describe it with where you are in recovery?
I
Um,
think go ahead, Matt.
Okay, I was just gonna, this also ties into Katie's question in the chat, just with gut issues, because I've been struggling with that for the past year, and I think that's very common for people with eating disorders or in recovery, is our guts are a little complicated now. And I deal with a lot of nausea and then anxiety because I know when I eat, I'm going to get nauseous. So there's going to be pain. And then there's that brain gut connection. And so that's something I'm actively struggling with, which is making intuitive eating very hard. And so, Katie, I would say like right now, it's just knowing I need to nourish. And like sometimes, breakfast this morning was hard. I like felt nauseous. But I know I have to do that so that I can have this conversation and don't have all this food noise over here and my brain is working. But I feel for you because it's very, very uncomfortable. Intuitive eating was easier when I started enjoying food again, and it still is connection, and it's more about grabbing ice cream with a friend. But now, when it's actually sometimes painful or nauseous, it is harder to just eat intuitively, and I have to go back to that more mechanical eating until I figure that part out. Um, but yeah, I'd say that I've just always struggled with intuitive eating as a concept because my goal with recovery was more, I just want freedom. I just want to not think about it. It reminds me of the body image discussion of like there's body positivity and body neutrality, but the whole issue is like the focus is still on our bodies, especially, like women's bodies, especially in celebrity culture right now. It's the focus is still on the body. So like with intuitive eating and mindful eating and conscious eating, the focus is still on the eating, and I would like headspace to think about anything else. I just kind of want it to be like, okay, I'm brushing my teeth. I'm going to eat breakfast, and then I'm going to go speak on a panel about intuitive eating. And not have the focus be so much on the process of eating, and instead have it be about the joy, or I need some nourishment before I go to class. Uh, and so that's what's tricky about it, because then otherwise in my head, I'm just always thinking about, is this intuitive? Do I want this? Am I hungry? Am I full? And I think there's also this trap of intuitive eating being narrowed down into like the hunger and fullness diet, right? So we're just focused on like, am I eating when I'm hungry and am I stopping when I'm full? And that is such a trap for folks, especially for us who are perfectionists and we're trying to do recovery perfectly. We're trying to do intuitive eating perfectly. And that there's just no way. Um, I think perfectionism will get in the way of your recovery hard stop.
I asked Lydia yesterday what the topic was, and just coincidentally, I was meeting with a friend of mine who is an RD, and so I asked her, what is it? Because she works with her clients on it, and she just paused because she couldn't define it. And I'm like, right, and she brought up more of the issue of the struggle with intuitive eating, which is our circumstances change it. So she works with a lot of athletes, and she can't just say eat intuitively when you're racing because your body reacts differently. It sends you different cues, right? So it can't just be this intuitive thing, because in a long race, and she works with long distance racers, they have to fuel. But their cues are like, nope, don't want to, right? And so there's a contradiction there. And so when I was thinking about this, I realized because I struggle with that concept of intuition. And going back to something we were born with, I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. Um, and I've always connected intuition with induction, which is a type of reasoning versus deduction, right? You're not looking at all the different pieces and putting it together. You're kind of just going, looking at the whole of everything. This is what I think the answer is. And I'm like, isn't that intuitive? And I found out that no, intuitive is actually lacking any reasoning. You're not actually thinking about it at all. You just come up with the answer. And I'm like, that's the missing piece. If we're going from a meal plan to trying to be intuitive, we need some, at the beginning, practice with reasoning with all the different things that come into making a choice. Our values, our hunger cues, external things like what's happening right now. What am I going into? You know, am I still, my body still not giving me the information I need? How are my interior reception doing right now? Am I doing well? Am I not? And so I think the intuition is truly, if you want to call it the gold standard, comes about after a long, long practice of reasoning and doing all the um, anti-dieting concepts and the learning about hunger and all the things that we have been taught in treatment need to be included in that reasoning because the answer one day will be a different answer the next day. Intuitive eating doesn't go, well, if I was a child, I'd always eat like this. No, that's not what intuitive eating should come to, going back to eating like a child, because we're not. We're healed people, hopefully healed at some point when we get to that point, that are different than what we were before. We can't go back. And making a goal going back seems kind of silly. I don't know, silly, but impossible. It's better to move forward in that concept of the vase in Japanese art where they paint the gold lines on the broken pieces so you see it. Well, we need to see it.
Oh,
Go
go ahead,
ahead,
Justin.
Lydia.
Maddie,
No,
go.
it's okay. Okay. You did okay. I was just gonna say I really resonate with what you're saying, Otter. I loved your analogy to the distance runner. I know for me, I got to a point where whatever intuitive eating means, I don't love that word either. You know, probably I would actually prefer something like interoceptive eating, you know, where you're eating. But maybe not, that's not perfect either, because you're right. There's all these things in life that can impact it. I know someone in the chat has mentioned, you know, chronic illness. Amanda's talked about gut issues. Grief will impact our ability, like our body's ability to say, I'm hungry, right? I don't know if anybody's had that experience, but when I'm grieving, my body does not say I'm hungry. But I did get to a point in recovery where that freedom Amanda was talking about, it was there. Like I no longer had to look at a meal plan to know when and how much to eat. My body was talking to me. It was saying like when I was hungry, when I was full, I was stopping when I was full. So it was just, it felt like, so I just wasn't thinking about food because I was getting those signals. Um, I recently, I haven't probably shared this with Lydia and Otter, but I'm pregnant at the moment and I have been for a little while. Yeah, thanks. But I wasn't going to share that, but it's very relevant here because pregnancy has completely thrown off my ability to eat intuitively. Like your body's needs, like my body does not talk to me in the same way at all. Particularly with, and sometimes it's easy to think of it when you're not, when it's not food, but with thirst. My body needs so much more water than it used to need because we're growing a human, I suppose, you know. But I get dehydration headaches regularly, and I had a moment a few couple months ago where I was like, I almost felt mad at my body because I was like, I'm listening. Could just tell me and I'll drink water. Just tell me to, you know, like why aren't you telling me that I'm thirsty? Or why aren't you telling me these things? But I think to Otter's point, we go through life circumstances and we need both that interoception And we need to use our mind and our awareness. And I need to go, you know what? I may not feel thirsty, but I'm going to drink water so I don't have a headache tomorrow. And I'm drinking more than my body is telling me. And just like Amanda's saying, you may not feel hungry and you may have to choose to eat anyway because you know your body needs nourishment, even if it's not talking to you in that moment. And so maybe it's like intuitive eating plus plus, but I think that's just like real life. Like you go through things and your body may not function in the same way, or it may not be speaking quite as loudly as it normally does. Um, so anyway, that's my.
Chelsea, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. I love that you actually told us live. I think that's very fun.
Sorry. Thanks.
And is so like so poignant too, because it's yeah, your body is like shifting in a new way and growing in a different way that the communication is going to be different. So, and like first time being pregnant too, is that correct? Yeah, so very much too, like a whole new experience for you in all the ways. So this is actually really exciting that you're talking about this too, while it's like while you're experiencing it. So different level of recovery in your body too. So exciting. Yeah, the intuitive part of it, I love Otter, like whenever you speak about like the language and breaking down things, it's always so helpful for my brain to like reconceptualize and to be like, oh yeah, like we're actually needing information and data that gets brought into all of this so that we can make decisions and we can be more clear about our choices. That's what I was hearing from what you were sharing. So it's not like intuitive. It's like, no, we're using reasoning that we have and like data, which was like a huge part of like my treatment experience was learning like, okay, what are the, like the times that I should be eating, the food groups that I should be eating, the like quantities of things and like really using that as data points for being like, this is how I've trained myself to be intuitive or to like have a framework of what this looks like. So like coaching the intuitiveness in me of like, okay, this is like what my structure should look like. And I really have a lot of that. I feel like ingrained in my brain from seeing so many meals prepared for me and given to me and being like, okay, I'm like, should be absorbing that this is what this needs to look like on the outside of treatment or in my like real life. And I do feel like, again, I feel like very fortunate. And sometimes I feel like my perspective can be like very, like seem like far off from where other people are at. So I just want to be mindful of that too. But I do feel like I've got to the point now in my recovery that I'm like, okay, do I want like what sounds good today? Like I do have that framework and I'm able to have a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility with things and like go based on taste or like style of food or like if I'm feeling more pulled towards like a sandwich or a like noodle bowl, like I have all of these options now of things that I really do just listen to myself and ask and see like, hey, what feels good? What sounds doable? What sounds enjoyable? And that is where I do come from. But it did like, I don't want to say that I just like wound up here. It took years of like weaning off the meal plan of being like, and training myself of like, what does this all look like in at times of the day, like it took work to get to this point. And I feel very lucky now and very grateful for the work that I've done to build this relationship with my body to say that it's like, yeah, I don't know if I would even use the word intuitive because it has been all built upon of data that I've taken in and I've been like, okay, like I know the diet culture voice, I know the diet culture language and the diet culture foods. And if those ones are the first ones that come to my mind, I'm like, no, that's not it because I know where that, like what category that falls into and I can recognize that that's like not true to me and that it's actually like the like other food is usually the one that is like the actual like true voice because I'm like that would be opposite of diet culture. So maybe I still do a couple of like the opposite action things of like, oh, this would be the diet culture option that would be selected. So I'm always gonna like and pick the other one. Because that is usually what feels like genuine for me. So yeah, and I do want to touch on to like the like that different things that happen, and that's very much still part of my story. And I do feel like that was a level of like my recovery too that I had to work with was like acknowledging that I'm going to have like gut flare-ups and I'm going to have to be connected to my body and listening to those things and not in a way of like my body's bad or my body's broken or like defective in any way, but much more around like I have a complex body. Like we in my household we call it a delicate ecosystem. My partner and I both have different like internal things that we work on in our mental health, and we're like we just have delicate ecosystems. So that means we have to be really mindful of our ecosystems and mindful of not in like a rigid way, but of being like I have to be aware that there's going to be things that are going to happen, and how do I respond appropriately and not having it be like this ongoing battle. So a lot of acceptance around like, yeah, this is my GI system has had funky things since I was a kiddo and been hard to maintain. And also, I know that like my recovery comes first and foremost. So making sure that I am doing the nourishing, however that looks, is always going to be the top thing, even when I know that I might be nauseous or, like those are kind of like the expectations. And then how do I build in that response system to say, like, this is going to happen. And also, my recovery is going to be my top priority to make sure I can do that. And this takes time and practice and lots of grace and lots of support. Like, there's nothing that I'm saying that I'm like, this is an easy thing to do. And it's something that everyone should be able to build. But it's something I've been really intentional about and been willing to give effort to for many years. Like, yeah, it's not, I never want to come across as being like, this is such an easy thing. And that it does take a lot of like analyzing and going back and forth between like, okay, what's the eating disorder voice? What's the, coming from the gut perspective of like, what's going to be the most doable on my body today? But that's kind of what it feels like. Intuitive is more like, how do you work with your body under circumstances, under different stages of life, talking about like if perimenopause, menopause, like all these different stages, pregnancy, like all different stages of our body changing, like how do we continue to adapt and embrace recovery in each of those, with our meal plans and with our nourishment, however that looks. Very long-winded, but many a thought.
Not at all. No, not at all. And it makes me, it brought up a question. I'm really like, it brought up a question for me, which is, I think we're all, many of us here have had years of recovery under our belt, which isn't always true with these panels. Like we have people at different levels of recovery. But I wonder if if we go back, to be honest, happens years in as well. Did you ever, can each of you think of a time when intuitive eating was kind of like one of those eating disorder traps of like, you're like, oh, I'm eating intuitively, when really it's actually it's just become another mask for an eating disorder. Like, and how do you catch yourself when that, like, can you think of when that's happened and how do you know it's happening? Does it take you a while to catch it? How does it show up? Because I know that's happened to me and does still sometimes. Um,
I was just thinking, I just to be clear, I wasn't saying that we should use reasoning. I just said that's the mid step between meal plan and intuitive. I actually think intuitive eating is the gold standard because then you don't have to think about it. It just comes naturally. Unfortunately, intuitive eating isn't an all or nothing thing. I suspect if everybody looked through their entire days for a year, there's probably one or at least one or two spots where you actually ate intuitive and in a good way, right? And the further along our recovery, the more practice we've had with reasoning under certain circumstances. And Chelsea just found another spot. She's like, dang it, I can't eat intuitively. This whole pregnancy thing is just, I got to go back to reasoning. I have to start examining things. I have to drink water without being told I need to drink water. Dang it, my body's not responding to me. But I suspect after a few months, your body might practice enough, your reasoning might practice enough, where your body might say, now I recognize you're thirsty. And you're like, oh, thanks again. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 6 months. Who knows? Um, and so that concept of when I was taught intuitive eating, I thought you just jump from meal plan to intuitive eating. And boy, that you're right, that was a trap because I'm like, yay, I can go back to eating whatever my mind says I want to eat because food isn't the enemy. And it was easy to fall back into my eating disorder, thinking I was doing the right thing because I was being into meaning I stopped reasoning. And in my initial state, that meant stick my head in the sand, you know. And so, no, I was not intuitive in any way, shape, or form because I had no hunger cues. So it was a huge trap for me.
Crickets. I can go. That's good. I don't have to go last this time. Um, yeah, I have to say, I mean, it's really present for me because I've got this now it's out now, now I've shared it, this pregnancy thing going on. And um it's really interesting because I've both had fewer like Otto's speaking to, like my body doesn't really speak to me the same way. And I've noted you've also got, I think, and I think this is true for like throughout eating disorder recovery, that body image voice still, it still rears its ugly head every once in a while, it's like all of those pieces. So I think in the absence of having my body talk to me at times when it would normally talk to me, I've had to be really on guard for it. I've had to be like really attentive to it. Um, of just going, am I like, how long has it been since I haven't? I'll give you a really specific example. One of the weird things that pregnancy does is it pushes your organs way up in your torso, including your stomach and your intestines, which is not great. And when your stomach and intestines are all pressed up, you don't get hunger signals in the same way that you used to, or at least I don't. I should speak for me because everybody is really different. And so, in the absence of that, I've thought a lot that in that vacuum, those like default ways of being they have been so put to bed for years and years and years. Like in the absence of those really loud hunger signals, my mind just goes, "Oh, okay, well, I don't need to eat. My body's not telling me I don't eat. I need to eat, right?" So I've just had to be very, very thoughtful and on guard for it. And then, like I said, I kind of had this moment where I was like, "Hey, body, hello," like. I'm listening. Just, just start. Why is it only a one-way conversation here? We're doing this growing a human thing together. Just, tell me what to do. Right? Like, so I think that it reminds me a lot of those early years of recovery when I had that absence of signal, like in the absence of interoceptive voices saying, hello, you're hungry, grumble, 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 it's time to eat, or okay, tightness in the belly, getting full, it's time to stop eating. In that vacuum of information coming from and sensation coming from my body, my mind will totally just go, "Oh, I don't have to eat because the body doesn't is not hungry." And so I've had to be really thoughtful about it. But I think that is kind of what I would say is that's where I see the eating disorder mask or the intuitive eating disorder kind of mask itself as intuitive eating is when there's not enough sensation there. Like it just goes in the vacuum, in the darkness, I shall show up. So I don't know. And I think that I'd be curious, Amanda, your thoughts on it, because I think with gut issues, that's probably really similar with like chronic illness, with all of those things that can really make it harder to hear what our body is saying. I do think there's this risk of intuitive eating kind of being like a sneaky way for an ED to show up.
Yeah. I'm just very like I'm hyper aware of when something is trying to co-opt my recovery. And so which is good, but can also be really anxiety provoking because with gut issues and uh I can no longer simplify intuitive eating into eating what I loved to as a kiddo or going to a restaurant and picking out exactly what I want from a menu. I have to, it's more complicated now. It's, what is going to make my gut feel okay? If I'm anxious, maybe that means making a smoothie instead of something else. It's putting more thought into it and not just purely like, what am I feeling like eating? Like what sounds good? It's what's gonna make me feel okay in my body, and that always doesn't align. So, um, but when these gut things started happening, my brain was, this would be the perfect opportunity to go back to my eating disorder because now I can just brush it off as, well, I have gut issues, or like, well, I'm just struggling and I'm not hungry. I used to think that was my dream, that I could just get, something that would take away my appetite. And it's so frustrating now, telling people that I'm struggling a little bit with appetite or gut issues because so many people are like, oh, that's my dream, or like, oh, that sounds so nice. I have the opposite issue. Like it's very it's very, very frustrating. It feels very isolating and lonely because now that this has happened, I can tell you it's not the dream. I want food, and I love it, and it's hard having to choose food now from a place of both gut complexity issues and what my doctors are telling me versus, I just want this because it sounds good, or like this is what I loved as a kid, or this is warm and cozy on a rainy day. It's complicated, and I feel for the people that are having some gut issues, or other health issues, or food insecurity, or something that prevents you from just purely being intuitive with food, which is why I don't like intuitive eating right now. I would focus more on, I'm practicing flexibility and I'm practicing responsiveness. And like Lydia said, I'm collecting data on, maybe this food I used to really crave and enjoy is hurting my tummy right now. So we're going to put that aside and try to eat something else that maybe I don't like as much, but that's what feels okay right now. Um, so I think not treating intuitive eating as something that, you get to, and but it's a practice, and we're practicing being flexible. And sometimes we're going to eat something, it's not going to feel good, or we're going to choose something on the menu because the calories are listed and maybe we didn't really want that. Um, but that's the practice, right? So, maybe next time you do get something else that you truly wanted. Um, we fall into this trap of all or nothing, black and white thinking of like, I'm either doing intuitive eating or I'm not doing it. And that's so much pressure. And then it can make us feel really terrible that we're not doing recovery correctly. And I've fallen into that so much. And then it makes people just not want to do it at all. So just give yourself some grace here.
Mm. I think when I think about like in like I'm trying to like come back to like my thought process around the original question, because as when you do go last, it is harder sometimes. We're talking about when intuitive eating like rears its head. Okay, yes, I'm like collecting all of the pieces. I think the time that it showed up the most was like early on in recovery thing, like in the recovery experience around like falling into different like groups that's like social groups or like identity groups that I was in, and maybe with like different like rules that they had for different foods. And if I was like, oh, well, like at one point being vegan was like very popular. And I was like, how can I participate in that while also being in recovery? And how do I make sure that like I can align my values like in that way? Because there is a lot of overlap of my values. And then being like, how can I do this? And I do feel like I'm like, if anything, that was the time that like more rules came into my mind. But even in that experience, I like really challenged myself to be like, I'm going to be flexible. I have to be flexible in everything. Because if I do look at anything as like, I'm all this or all this, like Amanda just said, like the black and white and like having like these identities so raw, I'm like, I think I come back to like my recovery is my like such a prominent part of my recovery that I'm like everything has to fit into that. So, and like another one, and I know that Eat, Breathe, Thrive has such like yoga roots and stuff. And like when I first did yoga, yoga was very unhealthy for me, and I engaged with it in a way that was very unhelpful. And in that culture, I found the rules and the ways that my eating disorder could participate in things. And it was a way for me to be like, oh, this is going to be able to like give me a new set of rules to follow, but under the guise that it's like helpful. And I feel like every different like space has an opportunity for my brain to find that rigidity and to find the like black and whiteness of it. So I can fall into it. And then I just always come back to like, if I'm ever going into that space, I need to check in with myself and say, like, am I doing what's best for my recovery? So I feel like that's been what has kept me from it ramping up. But if I ever fall it, like start to realize that I'm going into like any area that like has a label of what I'm doing outside of the like connected to what's best for me, then I like pause and I'm like very willing to check in with myself. And yeah, I mean, so much of it is, I think it is a practice, just like so many parts of recovery, that it's like we have to collect the data points, see the times when things are going to get tougher. And like definitely like around like when I've had like illnesses come up, I had norovirus, like not this past New Year's, but New Year's of 2025, brutal on the GI system, brutal on the body. And I was like, all right, I got to readjust my things for recovery right now. I know I'm not going to be able to eat the things that really sound good. I'm going to need to eat the things that are like medicinal for me right now and treat this as medicine to helping my body heal. And I know that's not going to be forever. It's going to be a temporary thing. So I do have like almost like built-in meal plans, right? For like when things do come up. And I saw there was a comment around this of like coming back to that. And like when I know when my mom passed away, I was like, I need to amp my therapy sessions up. I need to like reconnect with the dietitian and at a minimum have like a touch point for that and like to get back onto more of a like standard system. So being very realistic about like life circumstances and really coming back to like my recovery being like top priority of however that fits in. So same with gut things, same whenever an illness arises, a grief process, like being really in touch with my emotions and how I'm moving through things, like and sensations, all of it is so necessary for me to like adjust how I'm fueling and how I'm nourishing during those times. Hopefully some of that made sense in the discussion.
Wow. I love that. No, I love that having like kind of like fallback. I mean, you kind of like have your like not even just meal plans, but also like when life gets hard and there's all these things, I have these, it's almost like a crisis, in crisis is what I fall back to. And the fact that you've even got that set up is like a testament to the fact that you are in recovery and that you really take care of yourself. So I love that, Lydia. Um, please feel free, particularly as we get into the last 15 minutes to throw questions into the chat. And I'm kind of like listening for them within all the answers. But I think one question I had kind of going back to, I think we've nuanced and kind of like caveated the whole intuitive eating thing, but just for somebody that maybe is in that moment where they've been eating on a meal plan and they're starting to kind of, whatever we want to call it, at least get to that more flexible eating approach where they're trying to do that transition, which I think we've all acknowledged can take years and all of that. Can you talk about like I mean, maybe either what helped you, but also like, what is it like? What was it like? What was it experientially, phenomenologically like to start to tune into your body? I'm not even just going to say hunger and fullness because I think it can be bigger than that, but to figure out when and how much to eat and what to eat. Like, how did you do that? How did you start to get to that place that it wasn't just a piece of paper telling you that?
Fits and start. I was thinking about what Lydia was saying, and I'm like, oh, so many times I'm like going through that reasoning process, trying to learn that concept of intuitive eating. And I'm like, oh, I love that. That's going to be the answer. And I'm applying something. And then next thing you know, I'm head in the sand, back in it. And I'm like, I have to go back to the basics again, back to the meal plan. One of my three basics is journaling, because it gets me out of my head, kind of, even though that seems like the opposite. Um, but I think part of the process of getting from meal planning to the gold standard, that reasoning process, you almost have to have little flags that go, am I treating food like the enemy again? You know, if I am, that's probably something that I need to be aware of in this analysis. Am I, you know, honoring movement? Am I, there's so many things that the food police, all the things we learn that try to get out of our head. If we see ourselves thinking about that again as masquerading as intuitive eating, we're probably not on the right path. Even though you're like, I am totally an intuitive eater, I've got it, you know? Um, and so the journaling helps me with that. Um, but it's, like I said, it's fits and starts because after intuitively eating for a month, I'm like, that didn't work, you know? So I don't think it's something that you can just say, I've got it, you know? You're like, maybe I've got it, at least in this one start place, you know? When everything seems normal, meaning I have a routine, I do everything, nothing's changed. And little by little, I feel comfortable in that. And I'll continue to practice that in that one spot, you know? it's definitely fits and starts.
I will say that this is a very hard transition to make from a meal plan and or being in treatment where they are measuring everything and it's very rigid, but in a way that's supposed to help heal you. And then, but all of a sudden you're released into the real world and you're still wondering, should I be measuring things? Because now that feels a little disordered. And that's not what normal people do. Normal, that doesn't exist. But uh for me, there's no one answer, and that's what we all want of like, how did I do it? And sometimes I still don't do it. So, but what helped me was uh making my life a little bit bigger because eating disorders make your world very, very tiny. And I felt like I was living in this little snow globe and of making sure every meal had fat, protein, starch, of measuring things, making sure I was eating enough or not too much. And so a few things that helped me was being around other intuitive eaters, being around people who don't have eating disorders, cooking with them, cooking myself. I was never into cooking. Um, I could cook for other people, but not for myself. Trying new recipes, and then really focusing on anything else in my life that I love to do or discovering what I love to do, taking classes. I got into paragliding, and it's very, very important that you're nourished if you're in the sky. Um, so just eating because I have to if I want to stay safe. And then it becomes more about less about the eating and doing it intuitively and perfectly and more about like, I have a bunch of snacks in my glove box. I'm going to grab one so that I can put away that food noise and go do the things that are giving me meaning in my life. Um, because you can get very wrapped up in trying to do intuitive eating perfectly and or moving from meal plan to intuitive eating is very tricky and you can just get all wrapped up in your head about it. But it's gonna be slow. It's not gonna be smooth. And for me, it was just taking little pieces of joy, whether that's cooking with someone or eating and then going doing an activity, and not making it so much about, okay, am I doing this right? Because it's hard to know if you're doing it right, for your own personal body until you have more data. And that just takes time. Uh, and that's why recovery takes time.
Yeah, I think this question brings up a lot of just like reflecting back on like how much I relied on like treatment, like a treatment setting and like clinical professionals for getting me like supported in this process. Because I did need a lot of support of like visually seeing things plated for me of like, again, I know like this word like normal is so hard, but like normal based on what a registered dietitian that specialized in eating disorders decided was going to be a good amount of food, like what was necessary for me at that time. And having that modeled for me like repetitively so that I could like, I picture it as being like, it was like getting it like instilled in my brain of like, I can visualize what the, starch, protein, fat, like all of those things, like what the amount looked like on the plate because I went through so many days of having that prepared for me and then going into practicing me preparing it and having it like assessed by the dietitian to be like, yes, that is the right amount. No, that is not. We're going to need to add or take away, and having that like support of someone else saying like, this is what's going to be most helpful. And like during one of my last treatment stays, it was very much around like surrendering to saying like, I don't trust what my body is telling me to do or my brain is telling me what to do or how to portion. So can I surrender to this individual that I do trust to help me decide what that looks like? And one of my favorite experiences I had with like my outpatient dietitian when I stepped down after doing like PHP, IOP, then to the outpatient, my outpatient dietitian was like, all right, give me like a specific food that you like want to incorporate again. And we're going to start from like the easiest place that she's like that she could picture of like how do we build that into your meal plan and help you get to a point that you feel comfortable. And for me it was pizza. I was like, I know that like I lived with like 6 people at the time and I was like, pizza is something that we're gonna have like multiple times a week. So I need to like normalize my eating around it. So she's like, cool, let's do this, break it down this way. And then we're gonna like talk through every week until we get to the place where you're feeling like you can go and feel like safe and comfortable around it without these like extra parameters. So lots of steps and lots of support of saying like, how does it work? Did it work? Did it feel good? Did it feel too like eating disorder meal plan, like adjacent, like that rigidity? And like when did it move into the flexibility? But I could not, I really, for me, I do not think I could have done it without someone being very realistic about it and someone that I trusted in saying like, okay, I'm going to trust that you're telling me what I need to do for my body, and really surrendering, saying like whatever the eating disorder voice is commenting is not going to be the default, and that's not what I can trust. But it was like the intuitive was like, I think like coached, like that was like coached for me with having a dietitian that I really connected with and that I felt like understood my recovery, understood what my goals were, and was willing to say like, okay, let's take your goal and break it down into like the tiniest steps so that we can work towards it. But we're not going to skip right from like feeling like deeply afraid and uncomfortable around pizza to being like, I can go and be around it and I feel comfortable and I trust how I'm gonna process with it. So I really, that was like the biggest thing for me in my like moving through it.
Mm. I've seen this a question. I think we're at time, but I think I might be able to answer this question with my answer. So that was how would one suggest doing this without very close monitoring, one-to-one nutrition support? So I think I'm going to try to answer both. For me, I'm different from Lydia. My treatment took me to the point of a really good meal plan and really solid recovery on a meal plan, and then I kind of didn't have the support after that. And so I was sort of like in this place of I know how to eat with a meal plan, but how am I going to eat intuitively? And I didn't have that support. Um, I, for me, and I loved what was said in the chat earlier around as soon as we start thinking about when and how much to eat, we're not really like eating intuitively anymore. Like we've kind of like lost it. And for me, I had to kind of practice connecting to sensations in my body, sensations in this part of my body that I had a lot of strong emotion and discomfort, particularly my tummy. Like I always, when we have people come to our courses, I always make a joke when I say, where do you feel hunger in your body? And I say it's not a trick question when people ask, like not in your ear, or your toe. It shows up in our tummy, it shows up in that part of our body, which is so vulnerable and soft. And so for me, I had to spend time right before I ate and right after I ate, breathing really deeply into that space, which made me feel really uncomfortable, and just tracking sensations, just noticing what I was feeling. And for a long time, I felt nothing. And I was like, this is pointless. This is useless. I'm not getting anywhere. And over time, there would be just these little movement or, gurgles or fullness or tightness or pain. And then I had to sit with being with that pain. And that my theory is it was like building a muscle. Like I started to build a kind of muscle so that now I don't really have to think about it so much. And going back to pregnancy, I was like, this completely threw me off because I have to think about it a lot more now. And I'm like, what is that? Is that hunger? Is that a kick? Is that, like what is going on in there? There's all kinds of things. But I've had to like really spend time with it again during pregnancy to like I did it the other day. I never take baths, and I took like a really warm bath, and this part of my body's growing, and it's like, oh, and and I just put my hands on it, and I just tried to breathe and just connect and feel. And it can be really uncomfortable and really scary, but it's so similar to what I had to do early in the process is just really like refriend it and like make space for what's there. So if you don't have that one-to-one support, I think it might be a good place to start, if just starting to notice what you're feeling, not what you're thinking all the time, but what you're actually feeling in that space. Gosh, this went so quick. Such a good conversation. I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists and everyone who is here with us and everybody that's watching online somewhere in the future space time and continuum. We will do another one later this year. I know I'll give it over to EDF, but EBT runs lots of free support groups where we work on just this, actually, which is not an advertisement. And the only other thing I wanted to throw out there, because I know many of you are in recovery, we are starting a little campaign in June, and we're seeking people to share with us what recovery gave you. So I'm putting a little link in the chat, and we're asking if you feel comfortable to share a cute picture of yourself when you were a little kid and an acute picture of you now living your life and just in your element to show what lives are possible with recovery. Like when people receive treatment and support, the humans that get to grow up and have lives and all of that. So if it literally takes 3 minutes and we're trying to get a real diversity of stories and you can just put 2 sentences in and some cute photos if you feel comfortable, but there's a link in the chat if you want to share. Over to you, Lydia.
I love it. Oh, I can't wait to add to that. I'm gonna do my submission today. Thank you for sharing, Chelsea. Amazing. EDF offers free virtual and in-person support for folks here in the Denver area, plus all over. We have free virtual support groups, educational workshops. Drop in, you can just chat with us. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Chelsea. Thank you for everyone, for the community, for joining. Amanda and Otter, always wonderful to see you both and chat with you both about this. And Chelsea, lastly, congratulations on the newest member of the Eat, Breathe, Thrive community who is growing with us. And huge shout out to your recovery for allowing your body to like bring new life. So really congratulations and thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thanks. Thanks, Lydia. Good to
Of
share
course.
it. And thanks everyone for being here. And we'll see you at the next one.